I'm excited to bring today's episode to you today. I am at this beautiful lighthouse in Marblehead, Ohio. Now I'm gonna do a little bit more of the frozen shoreline here. I'm gonna show you today a little bit of how to paint this ice along the shoreline, and I'll use the lighthouse just as a backdrop. So grab a cup of coffee while we roll the intro. Alright, so I have found my location to paint. Now I'm down by the water and it's pretty windy down here, so I'm not going to do a lot of talking during this video. I'll do just the voiceover back in the studio. But I have chosen to do the lighthouse here in the background and then water and shore as it comes up. So I'm going to move the lighthouse over just a little bit. So I'm making that decision in my composition to just scoot it over a little because there's just a large gap in between. So that is my choice here. You'll see me work out that composition. So you'll see all of that. So I'm going to start going on this, and I'll tell you all of what I have on my setup here during the voiceover. All right, so let's jump in. So this is a 9x12 canvas board, and just have all my basic colors out today. I will run by those. And I'm like enjoying doing the canvas ahead of time right now because I can see some of this color peeking through. I might make a little bit more of the yellow ochre down below here because I see some of that in the water. Alright, now it's darker than I need because I'm going to rub some of this off. Okay, so now my canvas is lightly toned. I'm just going to take a smaller brush at this point and start working out my composition with a little bit darker. All right, so very loosely, I'm taking my brush and just blocking in the general location and composition of where I want the key elements of my composition to go. That lighthouse is positioned in about the 1/3 area of the canvas, and I've divided the horizon versus water passage to be about that 1/3 breaking point, which follows the rules of the golden section. And it's fine to break those rules sometimes, but in the context of a study and in this design, I find it most pleasing, especially as I'm going to be focusing on matters of the foreground and the ice. I didn't need very much of the sky or the distant information, so I blocked those out as secondary. So primary focus is going to be the water and the shoreline, and I love the backdrop of the darker trees framing in the showcase of what's happening in the foreground. So that provides sort of a stopping point, those trees back there. And they are a nice darker middle tone, and so that just sort of frames in what's really happening, as well as this rock piling right here. It just has a nice way of framing all that in. So I've got some darker passages in the water, in and this area where, oops, I have some of the working around the icebergs. And I'll work on this movement. And then the trees will take on a little bit darker mass. So I can suggest that by just putting a tone where those trees are going to be. The darkest areas in here. There's really nothing terribly dark in this painting. Maybe a few accents in the rocks here, but not much. This is where these darker middle tones are going to be. Okay, so now I don't really have my lights laid in yet, so I can take a clean brush and rub out some passages where the whitest areas are going to be. Now these white indications are more to help me understand where the primary factors of this composition are going to go. They are by no means the final stopping point for only the areas where it's going to be white. Mostly it's just to help me with the composition. Okay. So I like that arrangement is a good place to start. All right, so jumping in background first, taking some white, some ultramarine blue. Let's get the sky in. Beautiful blue sky today. And I always want to work the sky when I'm painting it to be a little bit more violet at the top. So in this context, the ultramarine blue has just the slightest violet tint to it. And then as I work my way down the sky, I'm incorporating a little bit more white and the smallest dab of phthalo green. And that sort of warms it up a little bit. You can't really see from the background picture here because a photo, or in this context, the video, just really muted the whole background. And so you can't really see the accurate color, but the sky had a wonderful warm feeling as it reaches down towards the horizon. So I'm taking that same color, that whitish blue with the phthalo green, and I'm putting it in between the trunks of the trees, leaving the canvas, the darker mass there, as the trunks for the trees. So I'm just painting around them to identify them. I'm taking a little bit of the ultramarine blue and yellow ochre, and I'm going to be working on now the distant land and the water as far away as I can see. And I want that horizon where the water connects with the sky to be a soft line. I know if I stare at it long and hard enough, it will appear sharp and crisp. But when you're looking at the icebergs or whatever it is, it's your focal point in the front of the painting, that horizon line becomes very soft in your peripheral vision. So I really want that to be muted. And so you have to paint it that way. It's what you see by not directly looking at it. And so that's kind of one of those tricks about edges. Where do you want the eye to travel? And you can use those edges to help focus the direction of eye travel throughout your painting. Everything in the distance in the background should be softer and muted because that serves as a support to focus the eye on the foreground, or whatever it is your center of interest. little bit of white and some cadmium yellow medium. I'm going to just block in very simply the lighthouse. Now you saw me using a little bit of medium there. That is a Gamblin gel, just the solvent gel that they have, and I really like it. Just especially when you're out in the cold a little bit, your paint tends to kind of get thicker and harder to work with. You can use linseed oil. In this case, I'm using a little bit of gel to help the painting along as I'm working on it. So just blocking in the lighthouse, keeping my brush strokes very simple. I'm using them in sort of a horizontal stroke to define the form of the lighthouse. And then I'm softening the edges so it doesn't appear cut out. That bluish haze on that one side of it is the shadow that's being cast on it by the trees in the foreground, and I really liked that too to help soften that edge. Again, the lighthouse is just a secondary thought in this painting, and as it serves its function there, it's helping to support the foreground. Now, when you have a passage of trees or bushes or foliage in your paintings, when those trees meet the sky, there's a softening of the edges on them. So I try really hard to concentrate on that effect of where the little branches and twigs get smaller, light diffuses them so they appear more smudgy as the tree faces the sky more. Blocking in the windows, and now I'm just taking my brush and I've mixed a little bit darker gray, and I'm incorporating that in the rocks and the passages below the trees, using sharp, strong, angular lines to direct the form of the rocks, just creating that illusion of a pileup of rocks, allowing some of the darks to show through and some of the middle tone grays. I'll come back through with a little bit of highlight on these rocks towards the end, but I don't want to spend a lot of time getting fussy with them. In a painting like this, when you really want to focus on something in particular, in this case, the water and the rocks, everything else serves as a background. So if I were to spend, 45 minutes painting the trees and the rocks and the lighthouse, by the time I get down to the water, everything else will have primary importance. In the beginning stages, you just want to block it in and block in your water and whatever it else is that's your focus, then decide how much more detail and information you want to go back and give, in this case, the trees or the lighthouse. And I do that towards the end. I come back and I give the trees a little more finesse and so forth, because, again, if I were to take all that time in the beginning and fuss with every little twig and all the distinct tree trunks, it can take on a life of its own. So again, efficiency is your key. It's your best friend in plein air painting. Block it all in quickly first, then decide. One of the things that really drew me to this scene was the movement of value and color and light on this painting. The shore here, the rocks, are very pale and light as they approach the water, and then as they slip back into shadow, they had just this really beautiful movement from the light to the dark, as well as the water. When I was painting the water, it had this, right up close to me, it had this nice creamy gray color, and then it slipped back into a velvety sapphire blue. And so that was my primary response to the beauty before me, is getting that movement on here, the movement of the rocks and that cooler white to the deeper shadows in every part of this scene. So right now I'm taking a little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of yellow ochre, and some phthalo green as I'm painting the darker patches of the water. As I move that water toward me, it's getting lighter, and so I add a little bit more yellow ochre, a little bit more white to the water mixture. The smallest bit of phthalo green gives it sort of that aqua color. Now, as that water passage comes around in front here, there's the slightest hint of violet in the foreground. You can't really see it in the video here, but I added a little bit more alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue to the white and yellow mixture in the as the rocks were coming at me. And I just thought that that was so lovely and pretty as I saw it down below me in the water. And then, of course, letting the, on the other side of the iceberg, in that lower right-hand corner of the canvas, a little bit more phthalo green and yellow ochre as that water slipped back into that darker sapphire water. Now, to paint the icebergs, I start out with the phthalo green, a little bit of yellow and white, just to make that first initial glass ice color. And I put that down first. I'm going to paint mostly over the top of that, but I wanted some of that to peek through in the ice. It just gave it that feeling of cold ice. And now I'm painting the icebergs and the melting ice. As I saw, the values were very close to the color of the water, but they had more white in them, which gave it a sense of opacity, making it feel more like floating ice chunks in the water. So I'm working this ice in layers, starting with the value of the ice that's closest to the value of the water. So that being, if the water is, one shade, I just added a little bit of white to that gray color and then painted that on for the ice. I will build that up to white as I finish up the ice. Before I get to more of the floating ice along the shoreline, I want to put the fissures in the rocks underneath the surface of the water. So I'm getting those indications in place first. Picking a little bit more burnt sienna and yellow ochre. I'm getting the wet rocks in place before I build up the snow and more of the light on top of that. Always look in a passage, whatever it is that you're working on, for what you can work on in layers, starting with the furthest back, working your way to the front. So in this case with the rocks, I knew I had to paint that lighter value over the top, but in order to get that lighter value, I had to have the darker underneath, indicating the wet rocks so that I could paint the dry over the top. All right, now I'm working on the rocks in the background, putting in a little bit more definition into those rocks. And you can see on the insert here, the photo of the scene, the direction, the lines of the direction in the fissures of the rock formations were just so beautiful in how they directed the eye back and also sort of defined the form of these rocks. And so I definitely wanted to maximize those for my composition. I'm taking a little bit of that dark and that sharp chiseled edge of my brush, putting in some more indication of the shadowier tree trunks in the background. I come over that with a little bit lighter value, more of a green for the tree trunks that are in front of those shadowed trunks. But just putting those indications in at this moment. So here I'm taking my brush, nice chiseled edge, and I'm coming through with just a very dark ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and I'm indicating where those rocks are creating somewhat of a cliff under the surface of the water, and also where the rocks connect with the wet of the water. So I'm using that to define that contour of the shoreline and also help to direct the movement through the painting. All right, so in this passage, I am just taking a little bit more of that sky blue again and cleaning up around the trees a little bit more. You can do that by painting the background, of course, and using that negative space, what's behind the trees, to paint the trees. Adding a few sky holes. I don't want to go too crazy and put a whole bunch of holes in to really draw the eye back there. And I also want to keep them a little bit more muted, again, to not really draw the eye as much as possible. So I took some of that gray that I've been using, the ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, white, yellow ochre, and I'm putting this now as the first block in for the ice patches, the snow pile-ups. I'm going to mostly paint over this color, but this is providing the foundation of where I'm going to be putting this melting snow and ice. So this is my, just that darker gray layer. I have added now a little bit more white and yellow ochre to that gray mixture, and this is the next stage of the lighter passages of the snow. Over and above this, I will still add a stronger white. This is not the lightest that the snow is going to get, but I like to build it up and allow my strongest lights to be up front and let this color be more of that white that I see maybe towards the background. Remember, our eye is always drawn to the area of the greatest contrast, so I try to keep the areas where I really want the viewer to focus in the foreground or, wherever that focal area is, but I use contrast for that as my sole source of directing the eye and keeping the composition in place. All right, off to the side over there, I took white and cad yellow, just the smallest bit. And this now is my brightest white for the snow. Again, I'm using this very carefully, only in the places where I really need that impact of bright white snow. And just putting it, of course, here on this main chunk of snow in the place right in the beginning here. I'm also using my brush strokes to help define the form of the pieces of ice as they're laying on this floating chunk of ice. And I'm just working my way toward the back of the painting with this white. Wiping my brush off, I'm just going to indicate a little bit of the water movement on the surface of the water as it approaches the rocks. And so just a subtle hint of gray, I'm indicating that those water movements. Well, that wraps up this plein air video, and I hope that you enjoyed this. And be sure to check out the links below on my upcoming workshops. And I also shared a little video clip here at the end of this video on my upcoming in-person and some of my online workshops. I think you're going to enjoy them, and I do hope to meet you at one of them coming up. All right, everybody, thanks so much. Well, that wraps up this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and check out the links below. I've got a bunch of upcoming workshops. I think you're going to enjoy what you see. All right, you guys, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. This 4-part lesson is online and is designed to teach you the fundamentals of learning how to paint portraits in oils. It is important to learn the basic steps to capturing a likeness and a personality in your painting. Art is so much more than just being a photorealist and a copyist. It's our job to see beyond that. In this class, I'm going to teach you the foundations of capturing a likeness, but I also want to underscore the importance of capturing who that person is, how to capture that personality. I'm going to talk about mixing skin tone and hair and all those other matters that we need in portraiture. I will discuss capturing form and light and structure and planes. All that matters in portrait painting. Join me in Florida for 4 days of fantastic plein air painting in one of the most beautiful beaches in Florida. Aqua turquoise waters, white sugary sand beaches, perfect temperature. It is the prime location for plein air painting. Painting on these silky white sand beaches is just such a privilege and a treat. Just mastering the color in that water is just, it's a joy, and I want to encourage you to sign up. We've got a few spots still left for the workshop this year in April. I hope that you can make it. We had a lot of one-on-one time and attention, a lot of extra conversations on oil painting mediums and caring for your materials. We talk about values and composition in your plein air painting. Of course, this is an in-person workshop. We talk about color theory and how to work out our color in our compositions. Just 2 hours north of Charleston is a town called Bishopville, and in Bishopville I will be teaching a portrait workshop at the Opera House in May of 2021. This is going to be an in-person workshop, painting the portrait. It has its own unique challenges, painting from a 3-dimensional form, but I love teaching that, and it's important to learn how to see shapes and values and colors accurately. Photos allow us a lot of distortion, so working from life is just a fantastic opportunity. In this workshop, I will discuss working from life and using our eyes to observe and measure. We'll talk about painting skin tones and hair and using our brushwork to help define form, as well as values and topography to create the illusion of a sculpted form. Learning to paint the portrait is a fantastic means of an art discipline. It's even better in a group setting where everybody can have the opportunity to hear and receive advice and help from other people, and you get that extra feedback when you can hear group critiques. This is a picture coming up here of the group that I taught in Ireland. Fantastic group of ladies in the portrait workshop there. I hope you can make it to South Carolina and take my portrait workshop there. Join me in Charleston, South Carolina, plein air painting workshop. Very excited to paint in this one of the most beautiful cities in the entire nation. Rich in history, Charleston is full of color, energy, and a rare vitality. 3 days of plein air painting capturing the city, land, and seascapes. I am so excited for this workshop. It is going to be a fantastic 3 days of painting in person in this. Look at the color of this. It's absolutely beautiful city. We're going to enjoy painting the beautiful beaches as well as the colorful cities. My workshops are fun and we're going to keep it engaged in a lot of energy. We keep very safe in the workshops as well. In this season of COVID, everybody's wearing masks as it's appropriate, but we are also outside and that helps with stopping the spread. So I hope that you get to enjoy this one and look over it, and I hope to see you in South Carolina. Listed in the top 100 most beautiful beaches in the world by National Geographic, Cannon Beach is a joy to plein air paint. The Oregon beaches truly are one of my most favorite beaches in the world. The water is a stunning aqua, deep sapphire, velvety blue. It's just unlike anywhere else in the world, with massive rocks and starfish, crashing waves. There's an endless supply of things to paint. And we had a wonderful time painting there this last October. We kept very safe, COVID-free. This is the group that joined us. We had a fantastic time. And being outdoors, we felt very safe. And this is a wonderful opportunity to just study how to plein air paint in a fantastic location. It's soothing and relaxing listening to the ocean waves while painting. Just sort of takes all your cares and washes them right back out to the sea. I love painting in the ocean, especially early in the morning like this. It's just absolutely breathtaking, peaceful. Ancient forests, mysterious. They have this intrigue that you don't find anywhere else in this country. Majestic beaches, soaring cliffs, makes Oregon a fascinating must on any plein air painter's list. The workshop is designed to keep you safe. You can see we're all spread out, and everywhere you look is somewhere fantastic to paint. So I hope that you take a look at this one, follow the link for more information. I would love to meet you in Oregon this coming year.